Hello, welcome.
Hello everyone, my name is Amber and today we will be having a meeting for the NCR, which is the National Conference of Religion. Now we have me starting off, Amber Rasho, we have Michael right here, we have John, we have Nora, we have our wonderful Noreen, and we also have our special guest, Pope Francis today.
Yay.
All right guys, so first off, our topic today will be Martin Luther and the Reformation. All right, first off, Michael, can you tell us a little history about Martin Luther before the Protestant Reformation and all the events that happened up?
Yeah, so before Martin Luther really came and changed the history or whatever, Roman Catholicism was the main religion, and it was so popular that it was referred to as just Catholic. People only really cared about reaching heaven, and there was a huge reliance on the church, and this life was deemed extremely simple because there was only one main goal in life. And they could find this goal by going to church and through sacraments and all that. And in 1517, Pope Leo X decided that he wanted to rebuild the Church of St. Peter's. This project would be extremely expensive, and to fund this project, he needed indulgences. Martin Luther was extremely mad about the idea of indulgences, and he didn't agree with it, so he decided to write his 95 Theses.
All right, thank you, Michael, on all that information and insight on what life was like before the Protestant Reform and Martin Luther. Now, Nora, I'm going to go to you. Can you give me a little insight on the 95 Theses that Michael started talking about?
Yeah, well, the 95 Theses was a list of propositions written by Martin Luther who wanted to dispute indulgences. He was so fed up by the church promoting the selling of indulgences and lying to people, claiming that giving money to the church would grant a believer acceptance into heaven, despite their sins. It drove Martin Luther to write these theses, and they contained a series of arguments as to how the church is corrupt and why the selling of indulgences is actually a scheme. And his main points were that you only get into heaven if you have faith, like true faith, and you read the Bible and not listen to it from the priest or the pope or whoever explains it. And he posted these 95 Theses on the door of the Castle Church in Wittenberg, and he sent it to the local archbishop, and it ended up making its way into Rome to the Pope, and it sparked the Protestant Reformation to protest the corrupt church and reform it.
Okay, thank you. Awesome. It's a lot of good insight on what the 95 Theses is about and what really made Martin Luther write them. All right, now next topic we have Noreen on discussing what the life of Martin Luther was like.
Hey. Okay, so just as Michael was talking about, so the Roman Catholic Church really was a universal form of Christianity that existed in Europe at the time. And this is what really caused it to be such a dominant power in Europe. And the reason why it was so dominant was because the Catholic Church was everyone's main source of all of their needs. If they needed food, if they needed education, if they needed shelter, anything that people needed, the sacraments, the Catholic Church was their answer. And because of this, that was what everyone knew at the time. That was the only religion that they really knew. And that was a main advantage that they really used. But another main advantage that the Catholic Church really used was the fact that the Bible was written in Latin. And this before Luther. But during Luther's time, that's what he really changed. So when the Bible was only written in Luther, the parish priest was the only one that could actually ever say anything. He'd be the only one that actually could say the Bible to the people. So that's the main source of what gave the Catholic Church a lot of its powerfulness. And this is what caused a lot of people to stay in the Catholic Church. So when Martin Luther came in, he saw, okay, people aren't really getting anything anywhere else. He created that as one of his motives for changing and creating this Protestant Reformation. So when he initially came into Rome, though, he came to be a monk. He wanted to study in the monastery. And he quickly realized all of Rome's corruption, from the priests selling indulgences to the church and its teachings. And what he really wanted to do is he wanted to shift society's view on the Catholic Church. So he really based the Lutheran faith is really based on faith alone, not worrying about the rituals that have to be performed, the sacraments. And he really also stressed the fact that the Pope the value of the Pope's office had no value in society. So Luther took all of these ideas in his time period and he allowed them to grow through word of mouth and also through the printing press. And that really helped Luther spread the 95 Theses into society. And what this allowed for, though, is for people to finally change their view of the faith that they had grown up always knowing. And it really happened through people having access through the Bible. And this is what allowed many denominations to form. And it really paved the way for a religious movement as well as a political movement. And without Luther and all his contributions, this wouldn't have really existed.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Now, you gave us a lot of insight on Luther and his life and how he felt about the 95 Theses and indulgences as a whole. Now, you did mention that he was a monk during his time.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give a little insight about the monastery he stayed in. So Martin Luther actually stayed in the Augustinian Church and Monastery in Erfurt, Germany. And that's where he took his vows as a monk during 1505 and 1511. Now, the monastery was made of very different aspects instead of just a place of worship. It also had an offering for weekly Sunday services. There was weekly prayer services there as well. A library, a cafe, a conference center for the monks to enjoy there. But unfortunately, after the Reformation, the monastery was seized and was occupied by different things, like there was a grammar school, a library, an orphanage, a government assembly hall. Over the next 3 centuries are what the main things that took up the space. But until the church was restored and reopened in 1851. Now, the monastery today belongs to the Evangelical Church in Central Germany, which is what it is used currently. Okay, now we've learned about what life was like pre-Luther. We learned about what it was like during Luther's life and his accomplishments. Now, Michael, can you tell me a little about post-Luther and what happened after all of his changes he made?
Yeah, so Luther had a huge impact on like this religion in general and the whole like Reformation and all that stuff. So because of Luther, there was a lot of religious freedom for people, and he allowed like a lot of denominations of religions, and even because of Luther, there was a Counter-Reformation, which was the response to the Protestant Reformation by the church. And because of like all these events and this because of Luther in general, the Catholic Church lost a lot of land, it lost a lot of followers, and there's this huge like revolutions and these things called iconoclasms, which were this destruction of images of like in churches and stuff, and this like pictures and art and all that stuff and statues or whatever. And also because of Luther, there's a huge like variation of religions today. So like Northern Europe is just mostly Protestant. The rest is mostly like the rest of Europe is just Catholic, and also there's this huge like tension and violences between religions even today and like before, like this throughout all of history.
Yeah, definitely. There was a lot of tension going around that time. Of course, today we still have a lot of tension itself. Now, I'm going to hand it over to John. Now, we know how Martin Luther was a big part in translating the Bible, which was originally Latin. Now, can you give us a little bit of information about how that process worked?
Yeah, so German readers were having a lot of issues understanding what the Bible was trying to say. And so, at the time, Martin Luther was being held prisoner for his own safety by Frederick the Wise of Saxony in Wartburg Castle in May of 1521. And he had plenty of time to translate the New Testament. He was in prison for roughly 11 months, and he was not a great scholar of Hebrew and Greek, but he wanted to provide a more powerful translation for the German people. And so he completed the New Testament in only 11 weeks, which was really impressive due to there was very poor conditions. It was dim, and his health was deteriorating. And he was released from prison in April of 1522. And so while he was in prison, he was writing this New Testament. And right after he was released, he was revising it with the help of one of his friends. And it was eventually released to the public in September of 1522. Now, immediately after he released the New Testament, he started working on the Old Testament. And he finished this complete translation of the entire Bible in 1534, and he continued revising it until 1545, 1 year before his death.
Okay, now we do see there were some consequences with some of the actions that Martin Luther took, and obviously he used his time wisely by taking time to translate the Bible and do other things. All right, guys, thank you so much for all the information we got. I think we learned a lot about Martin Luther's reform. Now, Pope, you got anything else to say?
He's just giving us his piece.
Oh, he's tired. It's okay. All right. Thank you guys. Now, meeting next Sunday. We'll see you guys then. Thank you.